When we speak of the Great War and Fallout, it is referred to as the Big Thermonuclear People Deletion Event. But what if an OG Great War veteran found himself in the proverbial trenches of Fallout 4?
Well, let's find out.
Our average bloke happened to find himself in a quaint little village away from the front, when Big Bertha seemed to have gotten a little upgrade. Maybe to Dora. No, not that Dora. This one. Having survived the blast, I exited the bomb shelter.
You maniac! You blew it up!
With the quaint village having been turned into yet another version of brown no man's land, I ran over to a local dugout and retrieved a squad's worth of weaponry, consisting of a small Mauser C96 Pistol, also known as the Mauser broom handle because of the shape of its grip. I also grabbed a Lee-Enfield bolt-action rifle. While not exactly the same as the one used in World War I, a Lee-Enfield's a Lee-Enfield. And a Lewis Gun LMG, which was practically unusable when not in a fixed position, so I installed a carry handle on it to fire it from the hip. I'm not that Chad from Atlantis, you know. And from abroad, we imported the M1897 shotgun, or simply known as the Trenchgun, and a not horrible looking flamethrower. And as a bonus, a trench tool. Lastly, I put on a late war green uniform, fit for trench warfare. As I made my way to the nearest town from the dugout, I grabbed the trench tool and used it for its primary function. When I reached the town, I decided to help out Preston and the gang because I could use some target practice. And because I had a plan on how to secure this Commonwealth I found myself in. For king and country. For which I needed Preston's militia and their
very particular lack of skills.
So I became a one-man firing squad.
You see, us firing squads are a bit like taxmen, sir. Everyone hates us, but we're just doing our job, ain't we, lad?
And tested out a bunch of my weapons on the local Batmans. Having shown the enemy how they did it in the 1910s, I made my way outside, jumped off the roof in the cheat machine, and proceeded to feel like I was actually a good shot with the Lee-Enfield. As I continued decimating the Batmans, a discarded, oversized school pet wanted to enact vengeance upon the humans that unceremoniously turfed it away. Luckily, I grabbed a heap of ammo for the Lewis gun from the roof of Preston's almost grave and unloaded into the curb. After blowing up a car, I ran into the patented "I'm scared, please don't come in" shack and finished the thing off. After felling the beast, Richard had a mental breakdown.
I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what's true anymore.
We've all got our past to deal with. No shame in that.
And gave the 1,000-yard stare. After that fun stuff, it was time to help out a few settlements from which we could recruit a new fighting force after the previous one got, you know.
Oh my god!
The first settlement needed me to clear some raiders from an underground bunker. Unfortunately for me, the Flamethrower mod added the occasional hyper-tough, high-damage Flammenwerfer enemies to enemy outposts. So after dying a couple of times to one above the bunker, I was inspired to go on a not war crime path myself. You know, cause lots of things weren't war crimes yet in the Great War. Having cleansed that bunker with holy flame, I helped out another settlement who only wanted me to clear the largest raider outpost known to man. So the first thing I did was take care of a dozen or so Batmans on the outside. Eventually, another portable toaster man almost succeeded in turning me into his lunch. A positive thing about those Hotmans was that I could usually loot about 200 or so flame ammo from them. So their incredible tough and deadliness at least came with something for my troubles. Having cleared the outside, I for once entered the building through the front door. I first tried to be all stealthy-like, but one bad shot later and it quickly started turning into an overall charge. You know, I don't mean to nitpick, but I feel like people would scream a lot more when burning to a crisp. Kinda like this. Burn! Anyway, Lewis gun. In the second to last room, I Obi-Wan 3 sleeping raiders with the trench gun.
Hello there.
And felt very justified with my actions. There was no other way of handling that situation. POWs? What's that? A condiment? A little later, I fumbled a grenade instead of meleeing. Avert your eyes! Anyway, I secured the last bits of the building and was promoted from Lance Corporal to General. Was this the biggest promotion in the history of ever? And what authority did Preston even have to promote me in the first place? Oh well, don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to. I'm a general now, after all. Next, I went on one last settlement recruitment run, before we would get to the real fun stuff. So I ran into a small confined apartment building, and decided there'd be no safer way of dealing with the enemies there than to turn the place into a raging inferno. Over here! Following this, Preston wanted to chat. Our militia had become large enough that we needed to capture a fortress to consolidate ourselves and keep ourselves safe. When we arrived at the fortress, the weather there kind of reminded me of the Battle of the Somme. Rainy, dark, and just awful all around. Speaking of the Battle of the Somme, we were mowing down crabs like it actually was the Battle of the Somme. On the German side. Or like any early war massacre, really. By the way, did you know that the nickname for Richard is Dick?
This time.
I just felt like telling you that. No reason. After clearing out the courtyard, I grabbed my tanks with bug repellent to exterminate some nasties. All before a counterattack, including one big cheese, attempted to drive us out of our newly captured fortress. A few days later, the culmination of my plan arrived.
I'm as excited as a very excited person who's got a special reason to be excited, sir.
in the form of a fellow veteran who was once stationed in this here fortress, which contained an armory within it, which in turn contained large mortars for us to use at our own discretion.
Now we're talking.
Now it's starting to really look like the Great War. All we needed now was a minefield, which just so happened to be lying around there as well. How fortuitous! Also, when fighting a tank in there, I got an epic trailer shot. Having placed a few mortars around the Commonwealth to rain death down upon our enemies, it was time to find out who done blew up the place. So naturally, I sought the services of a detective who was stuck in an underground subway. But first, for some reason, Swan was awake. And by God, I don't know why. It weren't me who woke him up. Anyway, the subway was infested with Italian wannabes, whom I can only assume were just a little lost while looking for the Isonzo riverfront. Don't ask me which battle of the Isonzo, there were like 12 of them. The Italian commander there was practically the poster child, old man, of
a brilliant new tactical plan to ensure final victory in the field.
Would this brilliant plan involve us climbing out of our trenches and walking very slowly towards the enemies?
How could you possibly know that, Blackadder? It's classified information.
It's the same plan that we used last time, and the 17 times before that.
Exactly! And that is what is so brilliant about it. It will catch the watchful hound totally off guard. Doing precisely what we've done 18 times before is exactly the last thing they'll expect us to do this time.
A lot of people died there. But who could say no to such a mustache? A fun fact about the Isonzo was that, since the front stretched from the Po Valley to the Alps, there were fortifications, dugouts and military towns being built into glaciers that are occasionally found today whenever a piece of glacier breaks off, sometimes revealing long-dead soldiers frozen in time, belonging to an empire that no longer exists. Austro-Hungary. Anyway, I rescued Detective Nick and went around the vault for a while role-playing as a Terminator with a real shitty minigun. At least for most of the time I ran around that vault. After blasting away Chonky and his boys, we exited the vault. Nick blamed the Institute for blowing up the place, since they were always the scapegoat. So I took it upon myself to destroy them for what they'd done. Our first lead to finding this Institute was a certain Mr. Kellogg, for whose house we needed the key. But because I was such a smooth chap, I got it using the power of diplomacy. No need to steal our desk fan out of spite this time. After finding out that Kellogg was hiding in a fort far away from our own, I made the trek over there and tried to use the artillery. Too bad that most of the shells were usually duds. When I did get to the fortress, it was occupied by what looked like walking corpses. The stuff of nightmares, like the ones you would hear in the tales from the trenches. Though upon further inspection, by means of hearing a loud scraping sound whenever I shot them, they appeared to be made out of metal. What mad science is this? The Institute really is capable of some messed up things. I guess Nick was right in blaming them for blowing up the place. And so, I continued along to get to Kellogg, while diving ever deeper into the bowels of the fortress. The crampedness of which kind of reminding me of one of the shittest jobs you could have in the trench wars. Undermining duty, where you basically had to dig beneath the enemy for weeks or even months on end to place explosives underneath them, while hoping all that time you wouldn't get crushed by a cave-in or get discovered by the enemy who would be countermining.
How do I get...
Anyway, Kellogg got a bad case of dead. After which, I grabbed an electro embryo from his brain and bared witness as the Kaiser's troops arrived in a zeppelin, trying to undoubtedly push us out of this sector. Back at Nick's, he proposed that we use the brain embryo to look inside Kellogg's mind for clues of the Institute. But first, I mortared a super mutant for fun. Once in Good Neighbor, I offed Finn and sat through the boring memory sequence. Though I now knew that the Institute used pure fine magic.
Magic everywhere in this bitch.
And that the defector was hiding in a large artillery crater. Before doing that, however, there was one thing that I needed to do. I mean, how could I not go to a hallucinogen? There was a literal chemical weapon gas leak in the building. And in the spirit of World War I, not yet war crimes, I started off toasting my enemies with a totally legal weapon. Luckily, I was incredibly paranoid and learned to never take my gas mask off. Against this obvious green chlorine gas here, gas masks actually did work, though it made it a little hard to see. A fun fact about those masks was that it was mandatory to have a mustache in the British Army until 1916, since it radiated uniformity and masculinity. Up until poison gas was being used, those glorious whiskers could interfere with the gas mask's airtight seal. So away the stashes went. Unfortunately for my foes, they didn't get the gas memo and were running around without gas masks as they slowly asphyxiated and started turning delirious, which made my job a little easier. When I got to the last rooms, I saw a man. He was suffering, so I granted him the king's mercy. After that, I got to the source of the gas leak and took all the gas canisters for myself so that no one else could abuse it. Except for me. Following hallucinogen, I attempted to go to the large crater to find the Institute defector. But first, I had to swat a few annoying insects off of me. When I finally did arrive in the crater, it was an absolute no man's land, where a green mist was hanging around. Again! Perhaps a heavily diluted gas this time. I got a gas mask, I'll be fine. At the center of this gassy no man's land, there was what looked like an undermine job, and some crazies living within it, whom I offed, because I simply don't care for them. Eventually, I found the defector in a cave, who told me how the people from the Institute magically vanish, and that to get inside of the Institute myself, I needed to kill one of their elite operatives to grab a code from him. So after arriving at the building, where it was busy with a mission of its own, I elbowed my way through a bunch of Batmans. Violently. Eventually, I arrived at Rocket Man and got my foreskin decimated.
My spine!
But eventually, I didn't get exploded and slaughtered my way up to the top of the building. When I finally arrived at the top, I came face to face with the operative, where I was as tight-lipped as ever as to not give away our operation.
You'll die like the rest of them.
Next, I needed to decode the device that I just grabbed. So I ran over to Hippie HQ and made them go away.
But before we go any
Having coerced the hippies to disband, I decoded the device, built a teleporter, and got inside the Institute.
Uh-oh, hold on to your butt!
Here, I downloaded all the info from their mainframe to give us a location and build plan of the Institute. Subsequently, I told the Institute's leader to piss off after trying to recruit me, which he didn't like very much.
You must be considered hostile.
Having been kicked out of the Institute, I prepared for the defense of our fortress. Not only had I equipped everyone there with a uniform and World War I weapons, but I also had mortar support and implemented the tried and tested minefield strategy. Now I just had to hope that they wouldn't all daisy chain explode on me. Anyway, a lot of those mines ended up detonating in threes, but at least I got the mortars to fire a few decent shots.
Okay, here we go!
As a bonus, those mortars also kind of look like minenwerfers, which was nice for immersion. The battle that commenced was fierce, but my soldiers, equipped with Enfields and Lewis guns, held the line valiantly. Contrary to the defense of Fort Vaux during the Battle of Verdun in 1916, where the fighting during the Verdun offensive had become so chaotic at some point that a few German soldiers, around 10 to 15 of them, accidentally stumbled into the fort's barracks, which is occupied by around 500 French soldiers, which then surrendered to those 15 Germans. Or Fort Douaumont, which was accidentally left almost undefended by the French. And it took 9 months of grueling fighting to retake it from the Germans, which also happened in Verdun. But not here. The 15 of us held off the onslaught, aided by our actually useful guard door, which held tough enemies in place so we could slaughter them with very little danger to ourselves. At the end of the battle, we launched the guy into the stratosphere, and could say that the enemy gained a grand total of 3 meters of territory. What a loss. At that rate, we'd lose the fortress in several years. Having won the battle, we mourned our losses. Cleaned up the battlefield, and decided to take the fight to the Institute, since we'd found a way inside, courtesy of the info we snagged from their mainframe. The way in was, of course, through the sewers.
This little rabbit's hopping down the old bunny trail.
Oh well, it's not like I was unfamiliar with trudging through absolute squalor, courtesy of my time in the trenches. So forward I went, as the chunky water rained down upon me, and the lepers were coming for me. Eventually, after much filth crawling, I arrived in the teleporter room, and brought in my militia. And
You are out of uniform, soldier! Where is your uniform?
well, at least Preston's wearing his appropriate uniform. Preston also gave me a few pounds of TNT to strap to the Institute's main generator, which would cascade into a huge explosion, completely annihilating the place. And since this place was located underground, we'd be recreating the undermining experience. But like a million times faster, without all the digging. After fighting our way through the Institute's state-of-the-art assembly line, we got to the way too brightly lit Institute interior. Having fought our way through the Institute's exterior interior, does it still make sense? We got to their main lobby, and were met with heavy crossfire, as we were being drawn into the center of the lobby while being shot at from all sides. Luckily, my adrenaline seemed to slow everything down for me, allowing us to break through the Institute's defensive lines. Some civilian casualties were also incurred here. The horrors of war. After meeting the Institute's leader one more time, I pushed through towards their main generator, followed by my militiamen. As we, and by we I mean I, entered the generator room, there was one last line of defense that had to be broken through. And we would break through. Hold up, presses, some actual news from the front. Oh yes. I planted the charge, teleported out, and blew the Institute and everything above it sky high. With the Institute gone, it was time to deal with the Kaiser's troops, who'd been an enormous nuisance this entire run.
Helicopter, helicopter!
So I ordered my radio operator to execute a fire mission on the Zeppelin.
Repeat, fire for effect. Confirmed. The Bridgewood is down.
The battle that ensued was hard fought, since the enemy choppers were on me like stains on a mattress. All the while, their walking, talking tank men possessed heavy armor, which only the Lewis gun or precise shots with the trench gun and Lee-Enfield could bring to a halt. The scariest thing was how agile a lot of these guys were. Like this guy.
God damn.
I'm sorry, I had to do it. I had to shoot him in the dick. He was hiding his other head from me. By the way, check out this Hollywood stuntman. Wow, look at him go. Told you they were agile. Also, 1915 called. They want their lack of anti-aircraft cannons back. The best thing I had against all of those choppers was the Lewis gun, which, while focusing on one of the engines, could down a chopper with about one full magazine. Also worked pretty well on all those tank men. If I weren't such a god of war at this point, then this Lewis gun would have melted away in my very hands a long time ago, due to some massive overheating, despite the enormous heat sinks in its barrel. Give me one of those for my PC. After shooting down an ungodly amount of choppers, and an even larger amount of infantry, the battle finally neared its end.
Look at the mess!
The Kaiser stormtroopers were much more formidable and effective than the Institute ever was. Yet our militia held their ground valiantly. We were victorious. By the end, the squad was all standing together for one of those thought-provoking war photos. With this sector once more firmly under Allied control, we can say, yeah! We denied the Central Powers a town and a few kilometers of territory. This was worth it. As is tradition, you can find links to the mods used in this video in the description, in case you wanted to handicap yourself with an antique loadout, to prove that modern weapons are for scrubs, and that all you really need is a hole in the ground, with a dash of artillery, and mines. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed this trip down to the early 1900s, and until the next time, ciao!